The kitchen on Elm Street was not just a room. It was the beating heart of a family history. The scar on the oak floor by the pantry door was from the Christmas Arthur tried to assemble a bicycle at midnight, 1978. The faint, ghostly outline of a small handprint on the window frame near the sink belonged to David, age 4, pressing his syrup-sticky palm against the glass to watch a thunderstorm. The air itself seemed steeped in decades of simmered soups, birthday cakes with uneven frosting, and the perpetual, comforting fragrance of toasted bread and coffee. Marian Elizabeth Wren had been 29 when she and Arthur first turned the key in the lock. It was 1969, and the house, a sturdy colonial with apple trees in the backyard, had felt like a castle. They'd painted the kitchen a cheerful sunflower yellow. The Formica counters were avocado green, a choice they'd laugh about for years, but never change. The first meal she cooked, there was a wobbly meatloaf, which Arthur declared a masterpiece, before promptly burning his tongue. 42 years later, Marian stood at those same counters, though the avocado Formica had long been replaced with granite. The changes had been gradual. A new refrigerator, when the old one died singing an asthmatic hum. A dishwasher installed after David left for college, a concession to her aching hands. The final, sweeping renovation had happened 3 years ago, orchestrated by Chelsea after she and David had temporarily moved in following Arthur's sudden passing. "It's just to help you, Mom," David had said, his eyes still hollow with his own grief. "And the market's bad for selling right now. We can pool resources." Chelsea's vision was one of sterile elegance. Out went the sunflower yellow, replaced by a shade called polished silver. The warm oak cabinets were painted a stark, high-gloss white. The floor tiles Arthur had lovingly laid one sweltering July weekend were ripped up and supplanted by wide plank gray hardwood. The room became a showpiece, a coldly beautiful stage set from a design magazine. It no longer smelled of years. It smelled of lemony disinfectant and ambition. Marian's only stand had been the Stover vintage, cobalt blue, AGA that had been her mother's. "It's an eyesore," Chelsea had argued. "It's non-negotiable." Marian had replied, her voice quieter, but firmer than she'd used in years. It stayed. Marian's life had become a series of careful retreats. She'd moved from the master bedroom to the smaller guest room to give the young couple more space. Her books had been box stand, stored to make way for Chelsea's collection of minimalist pottery and coffee table, books on Nordic design. Her weekly bridge game with friends was deemed too disruptive, so they met at the library instead. She felt herself fading into the wallpaper, becoming a polite, semi-transparent ghost in her own home. Her solace was baking. It was a claim on the space, a reassertion of warmth and memory. The clatter of a mixing bowl, the whisk scraping against metal, the scent of vanilla extract, these were spells that conjured a world before the chill of polished silver. She baked David's favorite banana bread. She made Arthur's beloved shortbread at Christmas, leaving a piece on his grave. And she made her mother's oatmeal chocolate chunk cookies, the recipe card stained with butter and decades. The cursive slightly faded. The Thursday afternoon confrontation was not a bolt from the blue, but the final, inevitable crack in a foundation that had been eroding for years. Chelsea's contempt had started as subtle eye rolls at Marian's quaint traditions, then escalated to pointed critiques of her clutter family photos, her outdated tastes, the living room armchair, and her unnecessary presence. David, caught in the middle, had chosen the path of least resistance. To Marian, it felt like a slow, bloodless abandonment. He dismissed Chelsea's barbs with a weary, "She doesn't mean it like that, Mom." He'd avoid family dinners, citing work. He became a stranger in his childhood home, orbiting his wife's simmering discontent, seeking refuge in the blue glow of his phone. The boy who used to sit on this very floor, building forts from sofa cushions, was gone. In his place was a man who seemed to find the sight of his mother a source of vague, complicated guilt. So when Chelsea stormed in, when the tray was snatched, when the words "Get out of my kitchen, old woman, this is my house now" were hurled like stones, the true injury wasn't the venom, it was the silence from the sofa. That silence was the lock snapping shut. In that moment, Marian didn't just see her son's failure. She saw the future. It would be more of this, more shrinking, more apologizing for her own existence, until she was nothing but a faint, bothersome scent in the air. Her calm exit wasn't shock. It was recognition. The time for accommodation was over. The drive to the storage unit was mechanical. Marian's mind was not on the road, but on the careful, secret architecture she had built in the years since Arthur's death. Arthur, a pragmatic engineer, had always been the planner. He'd left her financially secure, but it was Bill O'Connell, his oldest friend, and their estate lawyer, who had provided the emotional foresight. Marian, Bill had said one afternoon in his oak-paneled office, a few months after the funeral, David and Chelsea were already talking about updates to the house. "Arthur wanted you secure. That means more than money. It means autonomy. Let's just put some things in order." The order involved a quiet, legal review. The house on Elm Street was in both their names, transferring solely to Marian upon Arthur's death. There was no mortgage, David's name was not on the deed. Bill advised against adding it. For now, let's keep things simple, he'd said, his tone gentle but firm. He's grieving. You're grieving. Big decisions can wait. They never revisited it. David and Chelsea simply assumed. They talked of our equity and, when we eventually sell, Marion never corrected them. A small, stubborn part of her, the part that remembered the little boy but mistrusted the man he'd become, stayed silent. Then came the cottage, Arthur's modest life insurance, and a small inheritance from Marion's Aunt Rose had provided the means. They'd found it on a weekend drive, a neglected but charming frame on Lake Kimball, a retirement project. Arthur had declared, squeezing her hand. He'd only had that one summer to putter on the dock and plan the kitchen garden. After he died, the cottage became her sanctuary. She'd go there for a day, then a weekend, then a week. She used her own savings, bit by bit, to repair it. A new roof after a leak, a more efficient furnace. Finally, last year, the kitchen, butcher block counters, a farmhouse sink, and, of course, a place of honor for the Blue Auger, which she had quietly moved from Elm Street during one of Chelsea and David's weekend trips to the city. The drive to the storage unit was mechanical. Marion's mind was not on the road, but on the careful, secret architecture she had built in the years since Arthur's death. Arthur, a pragmatic engineer, had always been the planner. He'd left her financially secure, but it was Bill O'Connell, his oldest friend, and their estate lawyer, who had provided the emotional foresight. Marion, Bill had said one afternoon in his oak-paneled office, a few months after the funeral, David and Chelsea were already talking about updates to the house. Arthur wanted you secure. That means more than money. It means autonomy. Let's just put some things in order. The order involved a quiet, legal review. The house on Elm Street was in both their names, transferring solely to Marion upon Arthur's death. There was no mortgage. David's name was not on the deed. Bill advised against adding it. For now, let's keep things simple, he'd said, his tone gentle but firm. He's grieving. You're grieving. Big decisions can wait. They never revisited it. David and Chelsea simply assumed. They talked of our equity and, when we eventually sell, Marion never corrected them. A small, stubborn part of her, the part that remembered the little boy but mistrusted the man he'd become, stayed silent. Then came the cottage, Arthur's modest life insurance, and a small inheritance from Marion's Aunt Rose had provided the means. They'd found it on a weekend drive, a neglected but charming frame on Lake Kimball, a retirement project. Arthur had declared, squeezing her hand. He'd only had that one summer to putter on the dock and plan the kitchen garden. After he died, the cottage became her sanctuary. She'd go there for a day, then a weekend, then a week. She used her own savings, bit by bit, to repair it. A new roof after a leak, a more efficient furnace. Finally, last year, the kitchen, butcher block counters, a farmhouse sink, and, of course, a place of honor for the Blue Aga, which she had quietly moved from Elm Street during one of Chelsea and David's weekend trips to the city. It's a smart investment, Dave, Chelsea had said when Marion mentioned the updates. Rental properties are gold. Just make sure you get a good property manager. We should talk about the income stream. Marion had just nodded. Her secret, held close to her heart, was that it was never a rental property. It was her lifeboat. Unit 114 held the proof. Not just the deed and the cottage key, but the meticulously kept files, receipts for every heirloom, insurance appraisals, photos of furniture in her grandparents' homes. Bill had encouraged it. Sentiment is one thing, Marion. Provenance is another. It establishes a history of ownership. It's a fact. As she turned the brass key in the cottage door that fateful Thursday night, the chill of the empty lake house was less a discomfort and more a baptism. The emptiness here was hers. It was full of potential, not absence. She built a fire in the stone hearth, wrapped herself in her grandmother's quilt, and let the resolve harden within her. Her text to Bill had been simple. The eviction is complete. They served the notice. I accepted. Proceed with Plan A. Bill's call the next morning was the first step in a meticulously choreographed dance of reclamation. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a strategist who understood that justice in matters of the heart and home often required theatrical precision. The moving operation was a masterpiece of efficiency, but its emotional impact lay in its specificity. It wasn't a random looting. It was a surgical reversal of occupation. The crew, handpicked by Bill and a discreet antique dealer named Eleanor, worked with a reverent efficiency. They didn't just haul furniture. They cataloged stories. This roll top desk, Eleanor said softly, running a hand over the cherry wood, goes to the secure warehouse. Category A category were the pieces too precious to ever sell. Arthur's father's desk, the cedar hope chest that held Marion's wedding linens, the set of 6 ladder-back chairs her great-uncle had made, the massive oak dining table, the one where David had done his homework, and where Arthur's wake had been held, required for people to lift. As they carried it out, one of the movers, a young man with gentle eyes, paused. This is a beautiful piece. It tells a story. It does, Bill said from the doorway, and now it gets to keep it. They took the four-poster bed, but left the memory foam mattress Chelsea had insisted on. They took the Persian rug that had warmed the nursery floor, but left the generic jute area rug she'd bought. They took the painting's watercolors of the Maine coast by Marian's aunt, a portrait of a serious-looking ancestor in a gilded frame, but left the large, abstract canvases in shades of beige that Chelsea favored. They emptied the china cabinet of its hand-blown goblets and wedding china, leaving the sleek, white ceramic dishes from a trendy designer. They took the silver tea service, but left the Nespresso machine. It was a delineation of history from mere possession. They were reclaiming the soul of the house, leaving behind the hollow shell of its stylish facade. In the master bathroom, a mover found a small velvet box tucked far in the back of a drawer. Inside was Marian's mother's pearl necklace. He brought it to Bill. Found this. Doesn't seem to fit the modern aesthetic. Bill nodded, a tight smile on his face. Add it to the inventory. That belongs to Mrs. Wren. By 11 a.m., the transformation was complete. The house was not just empty of Marian's things. It felt spiritually eviscerated. The polished silver walls looked cold and industrial, without the warm wood and colorful textiles to soften them. The echoing rooms seemed to ask a single, silent question. What now? Bill's final act was the note. He didn't just leave it. He centered it perfectly on the massive, empty granite island, a solitary artifact in a barren landscape. The apartment listing was for the Lexington Towers expensive, but not luxurious. A place of transient living, not rooted belonging. The circled rent, $2,800, was a calculated figure enough to strain them, but not enough to be considered cruel. It was the price of a lesson. Changing the locks was both practical and symbolic. The click of the new deadbolt was an echo of the one Marian had made the day before. The house was now sealed, its ownership unequivocal. When the last truck pulled away, Bill stood on the sidewalk for a moment. He looked at the house, remembering barbecues on the patio, watching David learn to ride a bike on that very driveway. He felt a pang of profound sadness for his old friend Arthur, and for the woman who had been like a sister to him. Then he squared his shoulders. She was free. He got in his car and drove to the lake to deliver the keys and the inventory list. The discovery, when it came, was catastrophic. Chelsea returned first, endorphin high from her spin class. Her yoga mat slung over a Lululemon-clad shoulder. She fumbled with her key. It didn't work. Puzzled, then irritated, she rang the doorbell. No answer. She called David. My key isn't working. Is your mother having the locks changed again? She's so forgetful. David, mid-meeting, told her to try the back. The back door key also failed. A cold trickle of unease started in Chelsea's stomach. She peered through the front window. The sight made her gasp. The foyer was empty. The dining room, visible through an archway, was a vast, hollow space. David, she hissed into the phone, her voice trembling with a new, raw fear. You need to come home now. When David arrived 20 minutes later, they managed to force a window open near the patio. The interior assault on their senses was profound. The silence was a physical presence. Their footsteps echoed monstrously in the vacant rooms. Chelsea's scream, when she reached the kitchen and saw the note, was one of pure, unadulterated rage. She snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it, her face flushing from crimson to a mottled purple. The scream turned into a wail. She threw her phone against the polished silver wall, where it left a dent and a spider-web crack in the paint. David stood in the center of the living room, spinning slowly. The absence was dizzying. It wasn't just the furniture. It was the absence of his childhood, the spot where the Christmas tree always went, the corner where the dog's bed used to be, the wall where his height had been marked in pencil, now painted over. His mother hadn't just taken objects. She had taken the evidence of his own history, and she had left him in this expansive, echoing void with a woman who was now shrieking incoherently. His call to Marion was a pathetic explosion of entitled fury. Her calm, factual responses were a mirror held up to his behavior, and he hated the reflection. When she said, "You were guests who overstayed their welcome," it was as if she had plunged a knife into the heart of his own narrative. He had never thought of himself as a guest. He was the son, the heir. This was his right. The reality, as it seeped in over the next 48 hours, was brutal. A call to the county recorder confirmed the deed was in Marion Wren's name alone. A call to a lawyer friend confirmed that as tenants at will, they'd never paid rent. But their residency was established. They were entitled to some notice for eviction. But Bill had cleverly constructed the argument that Chelsea's verbal eviction of the property owner constituted a mutual termination of any living agreement. It was legally murky, but powerfully symbolic. Any court battle would be long, expensive, and publicly humiliating. Chelsea's social media campaign backfired spectacularly. A post on Facebook detailing the elder abuse and theft she had suffered was met with a surprising number of skeptical comments. "Wait, you kicked her out of her own kitchen, and you're surprised she's upset? My mom says that deed has been in Marion's name forever. Is that true, Dave? $2,800 for the Lexington? Ouch, that's brutal. The sympathy they expected from their circle of stylish, ambitious friends was thin and quickly evaporated under the weight of the facts. Their plight was not seen as a tragic betrayal, but as a spectacular, self-inflicted blunder. They became a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. Did you hear about David Wren and that awful wife of his? They basically bullied his poor mother out of her own house. And it turns out she owned it the whole time. She took every stick of furniture and left them with nothing. Serves them right. The move to the Lexington Towers was a descent into a personal hell. The apartment was clean, new, and utterly soulless. Their remaining possessions Chelsea's trendy furniture, David's gym equipment. Their large TV looked garish and cheap in the bland space. The monthly rent payment was a bleeding wound in their finances. They had been living, essentially, mortgage-free on David's salary and Chelsea's intermittent freelance interior design income. Now, they were house poor, their disposable income evaporating. The arguments started immediately, a constant, toxic soundtrack to their new life. They argued about money, about blame, about the stupidity of letting Marion keep the deed in her name. Chelsea's contempt for David curdled into open hatred. "You're weak," she'd spit. "You couldn't even stand up to your own mother. What kind of man are you?" David, in turn, began to seek Chelsea with a devastating clarity. He saw the calculation that had once seemed like sophistication, the coldness that had seemed like strength. He saw how she had systematically isolated him from his mother, from his past, molding him into an accessory for the life she wanted. And he had let her. The loneliness was crushing in the house on Elm, even with the tension. There had been the ghost of family, the familiar grooves of his life. Here, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of his own failure. For Marion, the first year at the cottage was a journey of reclamation, more profound than any moving truck could achieve. It was the reclamation of self. She began with the kitchen. Naturally, she unpacked her mother's mixing bowls, her rolling pin, her spice jars labeled in Arthur's neat print. The blue auger, reinstalled, hummed contentedly. She baked not out of obligation or as a peace offering, but for the pure, selfish joy of it. She made messes and left them until she felt like cleaning up. She played Frank Sinatra on the old radio at full volume at 10 a.m. She introduced herself to her neighbors not as David's mother or Arthur's widow, but as Marion. She joined the Lake Kimball Association and, to her own surprise, was voted secretary after calmly organizing a chaotic debate about dock permits. She made friends. Sarah, the retired librarian who brought her fresh eggs. Ben, the widowed fisherman who taught her how to properly clean a trout. She took a painting class at the community center and discovered a latent talent for watercolors, capturing the ever-changing moods of the lake. She read stacks of books from the library, genres she'd never tried before: mysteries, biographies, epic fantasy. The silence she had feared became her companion. It was a fertile silence in which her own thoughts, long drowned out by the noise of other people's expectations, could finally surface and breathe. She thought of David often, with a complex knot of sadness, anger, and love that never fully untangled. Bill kept her apprised of the basics: the move to the apartment, the mounting debt, the obvious strife. She did not reach out. Her love for him was not in question, but she understood now that love could be a bridge, not a cage. He had to choose to walk across it, and he could only do that from his own shore, not from the refuge of her dwindling resources. She used the income from the Elm Street house, now occupied by the cheerful Miller family, to establish the Arthur Wren engineering scholarship at the local technical college. It felt right, using the shell of her old life to build futures for others in his name. Her physical world was smaller, but her internal world had expanded into a vast, peaceful country. She was no longer a tenant in someone else's narrative. She was the author of her own. The knock on her door in February was both a shock and an inevitability. Seeing David on her porch, shivering and broken, was like seeing a ghost from a past life alive that belonged to someone else. His confession was the unburdening of a soul poisoned by shame. He told her of the constant, grinding arguments, of Chelsea's final departure. She had left for a brand consulting job in Miami, taking the last of their savings and a final, scathing assessment of his manhood. He told her of the suffocating weight of the apartment lease, the credit card statements with charges for things he couldn't remember, the silent, judgmental phone calls from bill collectors. "I feel like I'm in a hole," he whispered, staring into his tea. "And every time I try to climb out, the dirt just falls in on me." Marion listened. She did not interrupt. She did not offer easy comfort. She let him sit in the discomfort of his own truth. When he finished, the cottage was filled with a quiet that was different from the silence after Chelsea's outburst. This was a quiet of exhaustion, of a fever finally breaking. Her analysis was gentle, but unflinching. "You built your life on a foundation of sand, David. You let someone else define what your home was, what your family was, what you were worth. When that person left, There was nothing left holding you up. What do I do? He asked. The question of a lost child. You start from the ground, she said. One true thing at a time. The first true thing is that apartment. You finish that lease. You pay every penny. You learn what it costs to keep a roof over your own head. Then you find a smaller, cheaper one. You get a financial advisor. Bill can recommend someone and you make a plan to dig out of that debt, even if it takes years. And us? He asked, his voice small. She looked at him, her boy in the face of a weary man. I am here, but I am not a life raft. I am the shore. You have to swim. You can visit the shore. You can rest here, but you cannot live here. Our relationship, it needs to be rebuilt. Not as mother and dependent son, but as two adults. That will take time and truth and a lot of work on your part. It was not the unconditional rescue he had, on some level, hoped for. It was something harder and far more valuable. A roadmap to self-respect, with clear boundaries drawn in love, not anger. His thank you as he left was a foundational stone, the first one laid in the new construction of his life. Part 7. The new recipe. Years drifted over Lake Kimball with the gentle pace of seasons. Marian's hair turned a more brilliant white. She became a fixture of the community, the capable, kind woman in the frame, who made the best pies for the summer potluck and who could be counted on in a crisis. David's journey was slow, difficult, and ultimately successful. He did pay off the apartment lease. He moved into a modest studio. He worked with Bill's financial advisor, taking on extra projects at work, living on a strict budget. The process was humbling, but with each paid-off bill, he felt a flicker of a forgotten feeling, competence. He started therapy. He began to unpack the grief for his father he had never processed, and the cowardice he had shown his mother. He started visiting the cottage once a month, then twice. The visits were awkward at first, filled with long silences. They talked about safe things, the weather, a book he was reading, her painting. Gradually, carefully, they ventured into deeper waters. He apologized, not as a dramatic gesture, but in small, specific ways. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you after Dad died. I'm sorry I let her talk to you that way about the stove. One spring afternoon, almost 3 years after his first visit, he was helping her plant tomatoes in the raised beds by the lake. The sun was warm on their backs. He sat back on his heels, wiping dirt on his jeans. I'm seeing someone, he said, the words tentative. Her name is Chloe. She's a teacher. She's kind. She asks about you. Marian felt a cautious bloom of hope in her chest. "I'd like to meet her when you're ready," he nodded. "She knows the whole story, the bad version, and the version where I'm trying to be better." That summer, David brought Chloe to the cottage. She was a woman with a quiet smile and intelligent eyes. She admired Marian's garden, asked thoughtful questions about her paintings, and, without being asked, helped set the table for lunch. Marian watched them together. David was different, more present. He listened. He didn't glance at his phone. He looked at Chloe with a softness that was not deference, but partnership. After lunch, while David took the trash to the compost bin, Chloe turned to Marian. "He talks about you all the time, you know. How strong you are, how much he regrets. Everything. He's really trying. I can see that," Marian said, and meant it. Later, as they were leaving, David hugged her. It was a full, strong hug, not the brittle, perfunctory one of years past. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, David." She watched their car disappear down the pine-lined drive. The lake was sparkling in the late afternoon light. She went inside to her kitchen. She took out the stained recipe card, her mother's handwriting a comfort. She began to measure flour, to cream butter and sugar. The rhythm was the same, but the feeling was new. She wasn't baking to remember, or to placate, or to claim. She was baking simply because it gave her joy. In a kitchen that was wholly, peacefully, irrevocably her own. The rent had been paid in full. The house was quiet. The cookies were for her, and that, she thought as the first rich, sweet scent began to fill the air, was the ultimate victory.